Greetings of the day. I am Dr. Sharanya Narayanan from the Department of English, Christu Jayanti College. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic, which is quite similar in understanding culture, media, literature. So the topic for today is Simulacra and Simulations, written by Jean Baudrillard. Speaking about our writer, he is a French sociologist, philosopher, and cultural theorist. He is best known for his works on postmodernism, media, and also simulations, which is quite relevant while discussing this particular essay. Some of his famous works, other than the essay that we are discussing, is The System of Objects, which was published in the year 1968, The Consumer Society, published in the year 1970, The Mirror of Production, 1973, The Ecstasy of Communication, 1987. The Gulf War did not take place, 1991. Again, it is very important in understanding this particular essay. Then The Singular Objects of Architecture, which was published in 2000. Then The Agony of Power, which came out in 2010. Now, his theories are quite relevant, especially when he talks about the concept of the loss of real and the rise of hyperreality. That is what we are discussing through this essay as well. His major criticism is that what we consider today as real does not exist. It is merely a facade. That is what he keeps telling throughout his essays. This particular essay, Simulacra and Simulations, it was published in the year 1981, and it explores how modern society replaces reality with representations, or like he calls it, simulacra or hyper-reality. He says that there is nothing as real. The concept of real itself is false and it is simply disintegrating. And he defines simulacra or simulacrum as a copy or something that no longer has any original. It's quite strange to say something that doesn't have a copy, something that is a copy and doesn't have an original. So that is what he is saying. He is trying to say that what we consider as the original, over a period of time, it ceases to exist. That is what simulacrum means. And simulation is the process by which these representations become more real than reality itself, forming hyper-reality. So the process from which this reality transforms into hyper-reality is what we call as simulation. So hyper-reality is a word where the distinction between real and fake disappears. He starts off the essay by giving us a very fun concept, which is the map and territory relation. He says that in order to understand what simulacrum is, what simulation is, he is giving us an example of the map and territory. He is saying that in earlier days, when initially the map was designed, it was created as a replica of a territory. Initially, when it was created for travelers to travel from one continent to another or from one place to another, it was created as a mere replica of what we know as the territory. And over time, what has happened is that our understanding of territory has been replaced by the idea of map. Now, when we think of our country, when we think of the borders of our country, the first image that comes to our mind is that of a map. So we do not know what the territory is. Even if the ones represented in the map is the real territory or not, we do not know. So what has happened here is, though map was created as a concept to replicate the territory, now we do not know what the territory is, and this we have started believing in map as a concept, a real concept. So this is how he is explaining simulacrum. Over time, the concept of territory, which is the real, no more exists. It just ceased to exist, and the idea of map is what we believe in. And this is another fun term that he uses in this context, which is the desert of the real. He says that it is a metaphor used to describe a world where reality has been replaced by simulations. Again, taking the same example of map and territory, what we know as territory is what is represented in the map, though there are many controversies related to that. So what we understand as the territory, which is the real, has been replaced by map, which is a simulation or a hyper reality. In order to talk about this transition of reality to a simulation, he gives us 4 different stages. So, the first stage, he is saying that in the first stage, we find that image is kind of a reflection of the basic reality. Here, image functions as a faithful copy of the reality, and it kind of corresponds to the real as well. So, there are some direct representations of reality. Now, moving on to the second stage, what happens is that the real, what we know as the real, kind of is overlapped by the exaggerated version. It's not completely real, but there are some elements of exaggeration, manipulation in this. And it is kind of this what shapes our perception of what we consider as real. So the first stage is completely real. Moving on to the second stage, we see a bit of exaggeration. In the third stage, what we find is kind of the masking of the reality. At this stage, the image does not distort reality, but it covers the fact that the reality itself is disappearing. So it is kind of like a map. So if we think that there is, if we ask a question if there is real, yes, there is, but then something is masking that real. So there are symbols and signs which have been created in order to mask this real. The fourth stage is where it bears no relation to any reality. It is in its own pure simulation or simulacra. So, in this stage, completely the reality has been eliminated. The reality ceased to exist. Over time, what we consider as real is in reality a simulation. It's quite a ironic statement there. So we starting off, if we use the same example of map and territory, what we know as territory is the first stage, and it transitions into the second stage where territory and map coexist. Then moving on to the third stage, we see that map is more accepted than territory, and in the fourth stage, map is the only idea of territory. We no longer understand territory as the borders or in that physical form, but what we have created in the map. So these are the 4 stages he talks about, how reality transitions into simulacrum. Now, over the period of time in history, he is giving us a few examples of how we are able to trace the simulacra in history. So he calls it as the first order, second order, and third order. In the first order, he is talking about the pre-modern period where everything was quite unique and authentic. There were never copies available, be it art, be it literature, be it painting, sculpture, whatever it is, we could see it in its pure, unique, and authentic form. Now, the second order is, he talks about it during the Industrial Revolution. So, what happens during the Industrial Revolution is that we have mass produce of copies because of industries, because of printing press, because of all these facilities. What we see is that, be it art, literature, painting, sculpture, whatever it is, copies started emerging of the authentic or the real. And the third order is the postmodern. This is the order where simulacrum has preceded the original. Now, when he wrote the essay, which was in 1987, he was only able to see that particular situation. The AI had not evolved as we see today. So if he had witnessed today's age, we can just guess how would he have defined this age. So this is the third order, the postmodern age, where simulacrum has replaced the reality. And what we see today around us is no more real. Here, this is where we question what is real and what is a simulation. Now, he starts off by giving us an example of the hyper real or hyper reality, and it is a very famous example of Disneyland. We all know how Disneyland is. It is a illusionary world with themes like pirates, frontier, future. There are fairies, there are Disney characters. So it is kind of like a utopia presented to us. So he says that it is a social microcosm, a miniature version of the real American society. So when people enter into Disneyland, they forget about what is happening in reality. They completely remain aloof from what is the real, and they try to engage or enjoy this utopian world. But when they, when it is time for them to leave this Disneyland, that is when the reality strikes, that they have to go back to that monotonous, they have to go to that mundane. So when they leave this Disneyland, they think that now they are going back to the ordinary real world. But this is where Jean Baudrillard says that it is no longer a reality. Which we consider as the real world is also not a real world. It is again a simulation. We think that it is reality, but it is merely a simulation. Even from how we start the day, starting from the toothpaste that we use to all the daily things that we use, we find that we are influenced by what is being projected through media, or what is being projected to other forms. So we are never living an authentic life. We are always influenced. So this is what he is trying to say, that the real that we know as reality is not a real, but it is a simulacrum. So that is what he says. Disneyland masks the fact that it is not separate from reality, but a part of it. Like prisons which exist to make people believe that the rest of the society is free. Now, this is another example he uses, the prison. He says that when people are locked inside the prison, they think that, okay, we have to follow certain rules and regulations. They are constantly monitored. But that is what happens in the real world as well. There are rules and regulations to be followed. People are monitored constantly. So where is the difference? Is there a difference between what we know as the outside world and the world inside the prison? So that is another example he talks about. Then he says that Disneyland exists to make people believe that the real world is real, when in fact it too is simulated. So like I mentioned, when people leave this fantasy world, they think that what lays outside is reality. But no, that is not what reality is. That is also a part of a simulation. That is also a part of hyper reality. This is where he starts criticizing the cause for this simulation or this hyper reality that exists. And he blames capitalism for whatever is going wrong with the world out there. He is saying that now when he criticizes capitalism, it is not the traditional form of capitalism that he is criticizing, where we talk about selling real needs, capitalism selling goods. That is not what he is criticizing. What he is trying to criticize is the modern version of capitalism. He is saying that modern capitalism is responsible for creating the simulation, manipulating the simulation, and the modern capitalism is what is responsible for the elimination of reality. So he says that whatever we know as real is a simulation which is manipulated and which is created as a result of modern capitalism. And that is why he criticizes capitalism. We no longer consume goods for the use value, but for the signs they represent. He gives an example of the luxury brands that we use. We use these luxury brands not because we require it, but because we are trying to set an image for ourselves. So this is how capitalism is influencing our lives and how the reality is being transformed into a simulation. A very fun title where what he uses in this essay is political incantation. So now he is connecting capitalism with that of politics. So he is saying that capitalism manufactures crisis to make one feel that the system is dynamic as responsible. And he gives us an example of the Watergate issue that happened in the US. He was trying to say the political crisis that happened as a result of it, the scam that happened as a result of it. So he is saying that this particular scam is engineered. It is not something that happened as a part of the reality, but it was engineered to restore belief in law and morality. So he is saying that politics or political parties in power, what they try to do is that they create a simulation of their own. When people start losing faith in that political power, when people start questioning that political power, what they try to do is they create a crisis, they manufacture a crisis, and they themselves try to resolve that crisis. So what happens is that people start believing, okay, this is the power that we must be trusting in. This is the power that we should believe in. And they continue to trust in it. So this is how the political, it's kind of like a loop. So he is saying that power in the modern age does not simply exist, but rather through an endless cycle of crisis and simulation. So when there is some sort of questioning from the common man, when they question the power, what they try to do is they create a crisis and they resolve the crisis. He is giving many examples as well. There were many assassinations, many leaders like John F. Kennedy, they were assassinated, and he says that this was something that happened as a part of the reality. But then we have the Watergate scam that was manufactured, that was engineered by the political power. Power becomes simulation and tries to maintain the illusion of reality by creating crisis events. Meaning shifts based on cultural and media representations rather than objective truth. So, something else he points out is that how the idea of meaning also collapses. Along with reality, how the idea of meaning also collapses. He says that when you look at certain words, and the example he gives is that of news media. In earlier days, we get to know of what was happening around us was from news media. We completely trust them. But what has happened over time? Now we have news being circulated through social media and many other platforms. So what is real? We have to question that. We find the news being published in, let's say, television channels, and something contradictory to that is what we find in social media. So where is the concept of the real existing? We are questioning these ideas. So this is what he's saying: the idea, the meaning associated with that word is also completely demolished. Now he talks about the role of media in simulation. He says that news, advertisement, and entertainment do not just report events but actively shape how reality is being perceived. Now, what we perceive as reality is based on the advertisement, or based on the news, or based on all the entertainment channels that we have now. And he gives the example of the Gulf War as well. Now, the Gulf War, when it had happened, the Western media tried to take advantage of it and try to project a very different version of the Gulf War through their news channels. So he is trying to say that if you look at the news channels, they were trying to show, especially the American government was trying to show that how they are able to kind of resolve the situation, how they are able to help the people overcome the situation, how they are able to help the people without getting affected from the situation. So they projected in such a way that they are doing a great job. That was how Gulf War was projected in the Western media. So he is saying that this is what media has become. Where is the concept of real? Where is the concept of truth? It no longer exists. The media presents fiction as reality and reality as fiction, making it difficult to distinguish between them. So he's talking about social media trends, 24-hour news coverage, AI-generated influences. If you look at all these, it provides a different version of reality. And that is why we question, is this real? Then we realize that no, this is what simulation is, or this is what, according to him, is simulacrum. Society is dependent on reality, within quotes, simulated by media. So he is saying that whatever we see today around us is merely a simulation. We are simply existing in a hyper reality. There is no longer, or there is no more, the concept of real. What we knew as real has ceased to exist long back. So ending this with one quote from this essay: we live in a world where there is more and more meaning and less information. So there are words, we find words everywhere, meanings everywhere, but what is the information that we get from it is a question. So thank you. And this is what the essay Simulacrum and Simulation is about. Thank you.